It's a lovely, sunny lockdown day today, so it's very peaceful and quiet. There's nowhere near as much traffic up and down the road because, of course, everyone has to stay home. So it's a good day to have the doors wide open and work some more on this Riley. I still need to figure out where to get steel from for the rear mounting things. For someone like me, it's really hard to just get small quantities of steel because the big steel merchant people don't want to sell it to you, and I need to find a friendly engineering place where I can go and ask them for bits and pieces, which in my old house I actually found somewhere just up the road, a steel making place, and they could do plasma cutting as well. So I think what I'm going to do for those is I've emailed some plasma cutting places just to see if I can get some discs cut out of probably 25mm thick steel, and then I can machine them down. Obviously I can do the modeling, send them the DXF files, whatever it is they want to run the cutter, but I just need someone who's willing to do that and supply the material. So I'm still figuring that out. The brake drums are obviously all painted, so I started looking at putting together the front hubs of the car and starting to get this thing up on its wheels. So I do have over here, this was the set of hubs that I'd cleaned up that I was going to fit new studs into. They're pretty beat up. You do have to be a bit careful. There are two sizes of these, two diameters, and similarly with the brake drums, there's a machined face on the inside of one of the drums, and you really want to make sure you've got the big hubs on the big drums, otherwise they can warp. But I started looking at the hubs that came on the parts car, and they seem to be in much better condition. So I've been stripping those down, and the first problem is just getting the bloody things off. So to do that, I just made up these steel straps. So I think this is 5mm thick steel, and I just made 3 straps drilled so it'd fit over the wheel studs. You have to use the right-handed nuts as well, of course, because the Riley, the wheel nuts are left and right-handed, so you have to make sure you get them on the right side of the car. And with these 3 little straps, I was able to use my gear puller just to pull it off the stub axle shaft. And I find that heating everything up with the hot air gun helps a lot as well. So there we go. That's the that's the first time I've seen in there. So this is the main wheel bearing. The smaller bearing comes off on the end of the shaft by the looks of it, and this is sort of the star-shaped plate that goes behind there. So there's bolts that go through here, and that's what sort of clamps all of this together. So I guess the only thing that's really keeping the wheel from separating from the axle is this big nut and washer. So this looks like it's been done fairly recently, because that grease doesn't look used at all. Well, I've not really seen that sort of orange grease before. So these might be quite nice bearings. I actually have a complete set of bearings. The bearings for these aren't too expensive, so it was worth just buying new ones. But I'll get this off and just see what it's like. But the thing I'm really interested in is the hub and also the threads on here. I do have a completely new set of studs. When I had the wheels rebuilt, the guy recommended just replacing all the wheel studs and the nuts, because they do get worn. So the nuts are actually brass. But I'll take this apart and clean it up and see what it looks like and decide which ones I'm actually going to use. I was a bit worried about how to get the main bearing off, but a little bit of heat and a little bit of acetone ATF releasing type fluid that I mixed up just dripped down around the shaft, around the middle of the bearing, and a little bit of heat, and it just pretty much slid straight off. So with that off, you can see there's a paper gasket that goes in there, which seals up against the back of the hub. And then there's this plate, and it's got a leather seal inside there, which is what stops the grease coming out around the base of the stub axle. These plates often seem to be mangled up. I've got a few of them, and they're all pretty chewed up, but this one's actually quite good. So I may reuse these. For the rear ones, I think I've got new ones that have modern oil seals in them, but I'm not sure if you can get those for the front. So I probably will have to reuse these ones. But with that off, you can now get to these special sort of flat nut things. You can see this one's actually rotated around, but with these undone, I can remove the actual stub axle from the aluminium backplate. So that wasn't too bad to get undone. I do still need to pop that last bearing out, but since you can get to that both sides, you can just sort of drift that out. But I'll probably use the hot air gun again and just heat up the housing. It just makes everything easier. I have both the front hubs apart now, and this shows the difference in the sizes of the hubs. So you can see this one is a much smaller diameter than the other one, and because the brake drums I've got are all the bigger size, I need to use these. So I probably will just end up using the hubs I've already cleaned up, and I'll put the new studs into those. But it was good to get these apart anyway, and I think I can reuse the little seal plates, which even the screws on those are in perfect condition. And I'm pretty sure I've actually got new leather seals to go in these. So they're just soaking in a little bit of cleaner there. So it was still worth taking those apart, but I'm going to use the ones I already had. I finished TIG brazing the broken bit of the head. It's not pretty, but it should hold up. I've been checking with the rocker box covers just to make sure everything's still flat. Because when you bolt these on, you only want a very thin gasket, because the thickness of your gasket affects your valve timing. Because the rocker gear is held in the rocker covers here. So the rocker shafts actually go through here. So this all gets bolted down hard, and then you adjust the valves at the top here through these little covers. But yeah, you want a very thin gasket in here apparently. So the brazing is done, which was lucky. I ended up running out of gas right at the end. The next step will be to helicoil the threads, but it turns out I don't have a 3/8 BSF helicoil kit. I've got 1/4 inch and 5/16, but not 3/8. So I'll have to order that. I might as well order a 3/8 tap, which I'm sure I've got somewhere, but I just couldn't find, just to make sure the other threads are okay as well. And then I can finish that repair, and that should be fine, I think. The next step, I do want to paint this head, of course. I'll wait until I've done the helicoiling, but the next step will be grinding the valves into this head, and moving those valves over from the old one, which is sitting over there. So that's another small step forward. And I've cleaned up these front plates. I need to look through all my parts, because I'm sure I've got new seals for these. These will just need a bit of a wire brush. These ones are pretty flat. The other ones I've got are really, really chewed up. So I think I'll be using those. So there'll be more things to paint tomorrow. Not the ladder, because I haven't been doing much car stuff today, but one small job I did was, this is an old Sky satellite dish, and I just bought the cheapest Freeview compatible LMB I could and 3D printed a new holder for it to go in the end of the dish arm here, and that seems to work pretty well. So now we actually get the Freeview satellite channels. I'm out on my little actually I'll just turn this off. It's my noisy extractor fan. I've had that on because I'm out in my lab tonight, and instead of working on the Enigma machine, which I probably should be doing, I have actually rewired the first of the rotors, and I've pre-prepared all the contacts for the other rotors, so I should be getting to them soon. But instead I've been playing with the laser cutter. So this is going to be really handy for making gaskets for the car. That's the main reason I got it, was for cutting paper gaskets. But it's handy for lots of other things as well. So cutting stencils. This is a metal cover off a sort of metal box that we want to use in Little Shed to store poisons for the garden, things like that. So I've got the laser cutter all set up again. It took a little bit of fiddling around because, of course, I've got a new PC, so I had to reinstall all the software I need to make the laser cutter work. So I've reinstalled Inkscape, and I'm using Lightburn as the actual laser cutting software. I've actually got a subscription to that, although it seems like they've updated it and I need to renew my subscription if I want to get the latest version of that software, although the version I've got seems to be working fine. So as I say, I've now got Fusion 360 on this machine, and now with the laser setup, which is one of the reasons I wanted really good ventilation in here, I can cut paper gaskets. But like I say, it's good for cutting out stencils. So this is for our poison cabinet. Basically I just stuck masking tape to the front of the cabinet. I just took the door off, and because that's reasonably flat, I was able to then just directly laser cut the masking tape. So I can now paint this and then peel the tape off, and we should have a nice labeled box. It's a very handy little tool. I didn't have any red spray paint and rattle cans, so I had to break out all my modelling stuff and just use my airbrush on it. So I'll let that dry probably overnight and peel the tape off tomorrow, see what it looks like. So another Riley update. I don't really have much to add, but I want to upload what I've got. Otherwise it gets too far and I can't remember what I've already talked about and what I've already explained. So at the moment we're still in lockdown. I'm still waiting for the bits to finish fixing up the head, and I do still need to lap in the valves. It's probably going to be a weekend job, I think. And I'm slowly gathering together my pile of parts and starting to go through things and see what I've got and see what I'm still missing. So you can see I'm sort of assembling the front end bits. I still need to put the studs into the hubs. I'm going to use new studs and wheel nuts all the way around. The brake drums are good now. Pretty sure I've got all the bits to assemble the front hubs. I will order new brake springs and brake return springs and bits and pieces like that. I think it's worth replacing all of that kind of stuff because the springs are going to be, 90 years old. And I think it also makes sense to replace all of those as a set so that you've got new springs all off a good known tension so that the brakes are all pulling evenly. I imagine you could get into weird little problems if you've got weak springs on one side and strong springs on the other. I imagine that could make setting up the brakes a little bit difficult. I got the I was worried about the gap between the oil pump and the housing, but this is the proper O-ring that goes in there, a sort of rubber seal, And as you can see, it's quite chunky, so that is correct. So that's good to know. That came from the local spares department. Still need to put some paint on the rear half shafts. And I think I can order from the spares in the UK the right studs and things and the right lock washers that I need for assembling the rear axle and the differential. So there's 6 studs that come through here, I guess. And what I was wondering is what stops them. I don't understand what stops them turning in here, or exactly how that's supposed to work. I still don't actually know how that works. So I'm guessing it's a stud that goes on here, but what locks it in place? So if you imagine you've got the stud coming through here, when you're undoing the nut on the end, what stops this from turning? There must be some sort of lock washers or locking tabs on the studs that go in there. Like I say, I don't quite understand how that works at the moment. There's no... This is flat. So, interesting. I'll have a look through the parts books and see if that kind of explains it a little bit better. It's probably really obvious once you know, but I don't know because I've never seen one of these fully assembled. So there's that. Steel for the spacers, still trying to sort that out. The torque tube, I went through and I've got various of these muff couplers, as they're called. This is sitting in the evaporust, but these are noticeably worn. Is it this one? Oh, it's a bit hard to see. Well, you can see it on there. You can see how worn the splines are on this. So these are available new. I think it's worth just getting a new one when I do my order with the spares. I've also been cleaning up the universal joint, and I'll machine the little bushes I need from the plastic. I'm pretty sure these bushes were newly machined and just have never been used because there isn't any wear in them. Well, there's a little bit, but I think there's meant to be a little bit of movement there. But I'm going to go ahead and machine them up from this plastic anyway. It's probably another weekend job. I've got various things sitting in the evaporust to get rid of the rust on them. These are the rear hubs. So I'll de-rust these, give them a wire brush and then give them a coat of paint. Just make sure they're submerged. And I think that's about it. It's a good thing I'm at the point where I have most of the parts, because it's kind of a funny thing buying parts, dealing with some of the people in the industry who sell you parts. So this is a bit of a funny story. I'm not going to mention any names. I'm not out to upset anyone or destroy anyone's business. The people involved seem to be able to do that themselves. But I've been dealing with someone in the UK to get parts for a couple of years now. And I have got parts from them, no problem. It takes them a while to get them and send them on. And I did have another load of parts that I've been waiting for and been wanting to have sent out for quite a long time, at least over a year, and I've been asking and asking. But so far nothing had been sent out. But I thought I'd check back in with this person and see what was happening. Just a friendly email, catch up. But apparently they've taken offence at me for some reason, and I'm assuming it's because I ended up with the parts car and had happened to mention to them, well, this gives me a lot of the parts I was missing. In no way meaning I wasn't still going to buy the parts from them, but it seems that's what they've assumed. So I got a very terse email back saying he wasn't going to help me anymore. He got in a bunch of parts for me that I said I didn't want, which isn't true. And I've actually been asking for them to be sent for the last year. And just said, don't contact me again. So I guess I won't. Um, it's interesting in the old car world, there are quite a few people around like that. I've seen the same in the Austin 7 world. And it just doesn't make any sense because they're in the business of supplying parts to customers. And if the customers are willing and able and asking for things and wanting to pay for them, why would you just blank them and get annoyed at them like that? So it's very, very bizarre. Like I say, I won't say who it was. I'll just say if you happen to be building a Brooklands and you're looking for Brooklands parts, you're going to come across them. So luckily, I think I've got most of the parts I need. One of the things I do need is the remote gear shifter, the proper Brooklands remote gear shifter. And luckily there's someone who can supply me one of those, which is good. Hopefully that won't take too long. And that's a nice part. That's one of those parts that if you're building a replica of a Brooklands, that's one of the parts you have to have correct. Otherwise, it's not a replica of a Brooklands. It's just a special. So hopefully that will be on the way at some point, which would be good. What else am I needing for this thing? I think I've got enough now to assemble the hubs and the wheels, sort out the rear, and a lot of the rest of the parts I need are consumable type parts, which I can get from the Riley Register spares, who are always excellent. For any of that Riley stuff, it's just well worth joining them. And they will sort out all those little bits and pieces. So from them, I'll need things like a brake cable and all of the springs and bits and pieces like that. So I'll have to do an order very shortly. But like I say, I'm trying to lay out exactly what I've got at the moment, figure out where everything fits and figure out what I'm missing. And it is all those fiddly little bits and pieces like gaskets and lock washers and various studs and bits and pieces. So that's all looking good. I think the one thing I did need from this person was the brackets for the rear suspension, for the shock absorber mounts. But those aren't going to be too hard to figure out. I think on the Brooklands there was two ways it was done. Either the shocks were mounted parallel to the body or perpendicular to the body. Both, I've seen original Brooklands with it done both ways, I think. So there are mounting points on here, on these brackets. So basically the shocks just mount in there. So that's actually something I can make myself anyway. That's kind of one of the annoying things, was a lot of this stuff I probably could make myself, and I thought, well, no, there's someone in business doing this, supplying these things. It makes sense to go through them, support them, pay for stuff that I probably could do myself. But they're just not interested, so very, very odd. The good thing is there's plenty of really excellent people in the vintage car world as well. So I've met more nice, helpful people than I have difficult ones, which is good. One last thing is I finished up our poison box, and it came out pretty well. The box was scruffy to start with, so I wasn't too careful when I masked it up and sprayed it, but that worked really well and came out quite nicely. So that's quite a handy little technique that I can use in the future if I'm making any small metal signs. As long as the metal is flat and I can fit it in the laser, you can cover it in masking tape and then use the laser to cut the tape to make a stencil, peel off the tape and paint. And it actually comes out really well.